Okay. Hi, my name is Shane Brody. I'm traveling around the country talking to trans, intersex, gender nonconforming people about, and non-binary people as well, about what's going on in their communities, who they are, their beliefs, that sort of thing. And right now, I am no longer in Oklahoma. I'm actually in Missouri, and it is so damp and hot here. But it is so beautiful here. It's really lush and green. There's huge shade trees all over the place, and it looks like very recently this was farmland. All the streets around here are named Farm Road something, and with just a number.
That's really just kind of a Missouri thing.
Yeah.
There's also
Okay.
RR rural roads and CR county roads, but
Right.
there's lots of farm roads just in the suburbs around here
Okay.
specifically.
Yeah. I was driving around and I saw that. Also in Texas, they also have ranch roads. And
Oh, I don't have a ranch road around here.
They have ranch to market roads,
Ranch to market.
Ranch to market.
Well, I know
Isn't
there
that
were
cool?
ranch to markets around here,
Yeah.
but like the one in Joplin was called Range Line. So
Okay.
that's where they drove, down.
Okay, the cattle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Speaking of that, what do they grow around here?
Well,
Because I'm imagining that the real farms aren't too far away.
oh no, we're literally like one stone's throw
Yeah.
away from outside of the city line,
Yeah.
and that's where the farm roads start.
Okay. Yeah.
There's actually a Wilson Creek Farm Park just over there,
Okay.
and Wilson Creek was the site of a battle in Springfield.
Okay.
And that's where I know a little bit about what Missouri used to grow,
Okay.
and that what we're growing again, because it's during the Battle of Wilson's Creek, they would move bales of hemp around in order to hide behind them.
Okay.
So they grew
interesting.
industrial hemp for rope, and now we
Okay.
grow it for recreational.
Okay. So do you do you know a lot about the industrial history of the area or something or?
Well, I did a lot of studies when I was younger. I came from Joplin, actually,
Okay.
so I knew a little bit more about that. But I've been here my whole
Okay.
life. I've lived here.
Is there something special about Joplin, like why there's a town there, or?
A couple of different reasons.
Okay.
So, well, Joplin, if you look at some of the original seals, they called it the town that Jack built.
Okay.
Jack stood for, or it meant a specific kind of tailing that had zinc in it. So they did a lot of lead mining for a
okay.
while, and when
All
they'd
right.
extracted the lead, they had all of the tailings left over
Okay.
that turned out to have a lot of zinc in it. So they'd smelt that, and it became like Superfund site after Superfund site in
yeah,
that
right.
pocket of the
Well, zinc is very poisonous to people. Yeah.
zinc and lead just
Yeah.
all throughout the soil.
Okay.
And that's kind of a
That's
sad
kinda
part
why
of the
it's-
history of
It's
Joplin.
kind of why it's there. Okay.
Yeah.
And how about Springfield?
Springfield was a little bit more well-rounded. It was more of like a city, civic center of government. It had, definitely more inputs and crossways than, say, Joplin did. Joplin was about the same size as Springfield
Okay.
about 100 years ago.
Okay.
But that's when everything went bust because they didn't bring in unions.
Okay.
Instead, they did union busting very ferociously.
In Joplin?
In Joplin.
Okay.
And up all the way to Springfield. Pretty much everything between Springfield and Tulsa was just union,
Okay.
fighting territory because
Sure.
the miners were fighting for their livelihood. Back in the early days when they started, they would just hand a stick of dynamite and a mule, and they'd have a patch of land for them to try and mine on. If they didn't find anything, they'd come back and
Right.
yeah. So,
yeah.
But most of the time
Where's
they found at
OSHA?
least something.
No.
No, OSHA, not at all.
So Springfield, I did notice, since I was driving around, that there was a rather big rail line here. Does that go back a really long time?
Yeah.
Like
Well,
1800s?
I'm not as familiar with the rail lines
Yeah.
around here, but the rail line goes up to Kansas City and up to St. Louis. So it's an
Okay.
intersect from that all the way down to Tulsa, Oklahoma
Okay.
City, and then Little Rock.
Okay, so it's a little bit of a hub.
It is.
Okay.
So that's a lot of why this is kind of important line. It's just
Yeah.
because of the crossways
That's
between
what
everything.
That's what I was trying to get
Yeah.
at. I was like, why is there a town here? I'm always interested in that. Anyway, so who are you?
Hi.
Besides your interest in local lore.
Oh, no worries.
Yeah.
My name is Athena, it's she, her, and I'm 41 years old. I just started transitioning last year, started
Okay.
hormones April of last year.
Okay.
But I known
How do
about.
you identify?
I identify as a trans woman.
Okay.
I'm comfortable with that as a label because it tells a story
Sure.
of what I've been through or where
Sure.
I've been to be who I am.
Sure.
But I knew about myself that I was trans for a long time before I started transitioning. But I just sort of held it in my head as, okay, I can win this argument in my head, even if I can't get what I need, the resources that I need, or the hormones.
Yeah.
But
Well, it is quite a leap to do it.
it is.
Yeah,
So. It's a difference in my head that took a lot because that meant that I had to face everyone externally, all of it. And it started with just me in my head, my one idea.
Yeah.
And then it became me and my wife.
Were you
believing
worried
together.
at all about privacy? Because personally, I'm a very private person, so I consider it like medical information. I'm not like a medicalist, but that's a whole different discussion. But for me, it's like medical information, and it's not something that I would tell everybody, unless it was in a particular context,
Yeah, I can certainly understand that. And that was a lot of what I had a difficulty in my head sort of balancing out. Whenever I was young, I knew some people that I heard rumors of being trans, but they would disappear entirely from my life. And I knew that would never work out.
Did they move, like, to a bigger city? Or?
They would move to a different school and then drop out from a different city because it's small town America. It
Was this in
doesn't really
high
play
school
very
or
well.
college? Or
Well, friends from as low as grade school that I knew.
Okay.
They were at a different school for a little while during like middle school to high school and then disappeared.
Wow.
After they had come out as trans and to find a new name, a new identity, that's most likely why.
Interestingly, that used to be required too.
Yeah.
Thank goodness that's not required anymore.
No,
but
I
it used to be
couldn't
required
imagine.
of trans people that they had to completely separate themselves from the family, from their lives, and move somewhere else. If they were married, they had to get divorced. I mean, it was really awful. So
I couldn't imagine that. And for a long time, that's one of the reasons why I knew I couldn't transition because I was married. I still love my wife very much. And I want to remain married for my entire life.
Do you want to talk about that at all? Because for some people, it's really a sore subject, and it's difficult.
Yeah.
But,
and I can certainly understand why. We've navigated a lot of changes together.
Yeah.
And it's not to say it's going to be easy for anyone or everyone at all.
Well, marriage is always work. It's always work.
We're both willing to make the steps together, and that's really what it comes down to. But we have two beautiful children to take care of as well. We established our domestic partnerships very strongly. But she is a heterosexual woman, cisgender sexual heterosexual woman. So the attraction factor for her kind of dropped as soon as she understood me as a woman. But I've never had an issue with like jealousy. It's been kind of a difficult thing. We've got an established quad right now. We've got my wife's partner and well, she's actually been proposed to, so it's a fiancé kind of situation at the moment, but it's a polyamorous thing. But
so you're exploring different kinds of relationships here. That's great.
Absolutely. It's kind of part of the next thing that's just necessary to survive in the capitalist world at the moment.
Right. We have to explore all kinds of things, like how to share property, how to share resources, how to reform our relationships. Totally. Yeah.
Communism starts in the home.
Yeah. There you go. So can you explain that a little bit further if you want? I mean, you don't have to because it's very private, but what that quad means.
Yeah. We are just mostly a domestic quad. We share resources and economics. We prepare food for each other. We spend joyful time together. We watch movies. We function as a family unit.
Okay. And is that under the same roof or different houses?
Yeah. Well, right now we're still moving together. We still have one person who's doing a part-time out of the city, but all the rest of us are in town here together. And
that sounds really nice.
It really is.
Yeah, sounds like a new kind of extended family.
Yeah. I mean, I've had plenty of time when I've had cousins stay over with my family for this or that reason. Why shouldn't we extend our charity beyond simple blood relations? It was that complicated.
I bet your pets and your kids really love it too, because there's always somebody around to like take care of them and to go to the park or whatever.
Absolutely. Well, there is like a little bit of an issue with just making sure everybody has their own private spaces.
Oh yes.
We're in moving together and then getting ready to move out and build up that kind of thing. But it's been impossible for us to get to real estate up to this point.
A single story home. So it's not really large.
No.
Yeah.
No.
It's not like in some places where they have, like McMansion kind of houses. Yeah.
No, we're going to be sleeping, tight quarters together here. But
Yeah.
it's a house designed for 3 or 4 people, generally speaking.
A nuclear family.
Yeah, a nuclear family.
Yeah.
And that's what we were up to this point, and basically a year ago or so is when we started all kind of talking about making this
Well, in
work
close
together.
quarters, you can work a lot of stuff out.
Well, you have to.
You have
to. But there's kind of, if you've been in COVID and you've been with a partner in a relationship, there's this echo chamber where things just change in their aspect or change in their tone over time. And having a third party makes you behave a little bit better.
That's true. How did COVID change things for you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was already thinking about...
I was, just for context, I was living in a cabin by myself with my dog. So
Yeah, not a whole lot.
No, not a lot for me. It changed. But how did it change for you?
Yeah. Well, I was kind of thinking about how much of a, I don't know, monkey wrench it threw into things here, but it wasn't too big of a change for me at the time. I was really depressive, but I was working still where I am now, and I'd gone to a messaging.
Were you thinking about your gender stuff really strongly? Is that part of that?
That's been on my mind off and on at least once a year. I'd just have a crisis or some event that I would be thinking about it deeply, and then in between thinking, well, it couldn't be that's just a distraction or whatever.
But I keep talking to trans women in particular, who are a little bit older, and you're a little bit older. You're not a teen. You're not a teenager.
Yeah, no.
So I'm older as well. But who, COVID gave them some time or some space or something to think about this stuff a little bit more.
Yeah.
Was that the case for you?
Yeah. At the time, I had gone to a messaging role before COVID, and I was doing typing all the time, so I wasn't dealing with my voice. Yeah, for work.
Okay.
And so I was thinking about it a lot. This would be a perfect time. I don't have to use my voice.
Yeah.
I could start the process and get things going.
Sure.
COVID came, and I thought it's the end of the fucking world. And then I thought through my kind of male lens, oh my God, I could lose this. I could lose this. And then I came to a state of I'm going to lose this.
Were you worried from a provider role as a parent? Okay.
Yeah, as this is something that I have no control over, that this is bigger than me.
Right.
All sorts of panic about that.
Right.
And then having to go through children going through their prime teenage years and watching them have to go through isolation through that.
Right.
Changing my idea about myself as a parent during that time.
That's a lot of change.
Yeah.
Yeah. Were you worried that you were going to disappoint your kids in some way, or?
I'd always taught them that they could be whoever they wanted to be, and that I wanted them to be able to respect anyone regardless of their gender identity or sexuality. So by the time that I was ready and I told them about it, they were the second and third people that I told about
There
it,
you go.
basically.
Yeah.
They were just accepting. And,
Great.
And I said, do you guys have any thoughts on it? And my oldest said, well, you raised us to be cool with it, so
Yeah.
we don't really have a whole lot of questions or anything.
Well,
and
that's
then
great. You're
youngest,
raising such great kids who are going to be, well-functioning adults.
my youngest just clapped and said, I'm so glad you're going to get to explore this.
All right. Oh, clapping. Oh, I love it.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, it's been nothing but support from my nuclear family.
Yes.
Extended family has been a little bit of a different story. I really haven't heard from anyone outside of, I've been talking a bit with my mom.
You're talking about your biological family.
Biological family. My brother's still in contact, and we are still, pretty tight. But outside of that, I've got my mom and my stepdad and my stepmom and my dad. And none of them want to recognize my identity or talk to me about that. My mom still is in contact regularly. The last time I had a voice conversation with my dad, he hasn't really contacted me back. Except for one time.
Have they seen you at all, or has this been over the phone, or?
Well, since I started transitioning, they were actually the basically fourth and fifth or whatever people that I'd told about it. I wanted to tell them first, give them a chance to say whatever they wanted to say before.
Was this in person though?
I did say it in person to my dad. To my mom, it's been over the phone.
Okay.
But in person, I told my dad, and I said, I'm going to be transitioning. and I want to live the rest of my life as a woman, and I want your love and support through that.
Yeah.
And he said, I'll always love you. And then we moved on to the next subject awkwardly.
Okay.
And then he brought it up another 2 weeks later when we were at a public
Oh,
restaurant.
he brought it up.
Yeah,
Okay.
at a public restaurant.
Okay.
Just
Were
like
you
normal conversation.
I don't know the language around it. Sorry if this is old language, but were you dressing at that point, or
No, I wasn't
Okay.
presenting outwardly.
Okay.
I had gone basically zero outside presentation.
Okay.
I went to the doctor, tried to apply for, pills there, and then I went to the online prescription. I
Yes.
finally got the pills there. And I didn't dress outwardly really until August of last year is when I started presenting full time.
Okay.
Up until then, it was just sort of like, okay, at home, I'll have this name. I'm trying this out. This is a part
Yeah.
of my expression.
Yeah.
And it's just been overwhelmingly like, this is the best year of my life.
Yeah.
I,
Oh, wonderful.
like
Wonderful.
I was depressive and stuck and isolated by myself before. I've found
So you
community and meaning and
feel a sense of joy.
absolutely,
Yeah,
yeah,
wonderful, wonderful.
absolutely. Throughout this whole process, it's been amazing, and it would just kind of start like, I just have like physical feelings of this is where I'm feeling like my transition today. It's like right behind my eyes. I'm looking through like a new lens.
Oh,
or
wow.
It's in my spine, like it's
Wow.
a piece of resolve to me. Yeah,
That's so sensual. That's great. Do you think that the hormones are part of that as well?
yeah, I would have to say so. Dysphoria has a lot of different effects on a person. For people who are male to female transition, for me, like blood flow to my genital areas,
Sure.
like sometimes extraneous, extra, and it just causes me a lot of discomfort and a lot of mental distress over
Right.
it as well.
Right.
So definitely reducing my testosterone has helped, but having a replacement with that over estrogen and having bodily changes are incredibly affirming. So it's you're turning down the noise on one set of hormones
Sure.
that don't match what your brain is telling
Sure,
you, and you're turning up the volume slowly on
Sure.
this other as you're like starting to trickle in these little effects.
I've heard that it's more becomes like a bodily feeling that's spread out more in the body. Yeah.
It is, and like
Yeah.
I said, it started like behind my eyes. I just
Wow.
feel like I'm looking through some new lens, and then it'd
Yeah.
be like my head, and then my spine, and then
Yeah.
all the way to my extremities. And it was just like one day I was taking a shower, and I didn't have any music on, and I didn't have a podcast on, and normally I'm always trying to, have something on in the
Okay.
background to distract me.
Sure.
And there wasn't whatever it was, the gnawing worm at the back of the brain that was there. It just was gone. And I thought, okay. It was
That's really
it was
cool.
this. It was this.
Yeah.
The whole
So
time.
yeah, I heard from one of actually my first interviewees. She said that she just felt more sensitive to everybody and to everything.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas somebody like me, it's not like I felt like I was cut off from things, but I felt like at the very first when I was on testosterone, it cut off some of my ability to cry, for instance. I didn't feel as a word that people might use as codependent. Not as like searching, oh, are you okay? Are you okay? I'm usually like that. And so I felt less of that. And actually for me, that was a blessing.
Yeah.
But from the other side, I would think that would also be kind of a blessing, to be more enriched in sensitivity. Yeah.
Well, like a lot of those ideas, though, are kind of enmeshed with our cultural concept about like what patriarchy is or what it means to be female or male. But there is, I think, some sense to like the biology possibly leading us to
Yes.
behave one way or another,
Yeah,
which is
yeah.
I don't know how exactly. I have never
don't
studied
know
that
either.
mechanism. But
This is anecdotal,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
it's our experience.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's a pretty shared experience too. Is that a lot of male to female experiences will feel like this is too big for me, this is too massive for me, or whatever. I haven't really had a lot of feeling like that necessarily because I've just been in awe at a lot of the things that I've been missing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Missing like what?
Honestly, like I'd cut off a lot of friendships just for the
Okay.
last decade because I didn't feel comfortable, expressing myself or
Sure.
really letting any real feelings out. So kind of
Because you couldn't.
No.
You couldn't really share yourself.
No, because I mean, all of the deepest and most meaningful parts of me were something that I thought people would just reject
Right.
outright and walk away from.
And some people do.
And I had plenty of life and lived examples where that was the case.
Right.
But
Marriage is ending, family disappearing, all that
exactly.
stuff.
So that was immensely a part of the struggle that both I and my wife went through.
Right.
It's just to find out there's a meaning to, like, you know, this relationship beyond, say, the physical attraction, or there's a meaning to this beyond what other people might look at it and see.
Well, and a lot of marriages evolve that way as well. You know, they might start out one way, very romantic or something like that. But usually, especially with the introduction of kids, I mean, I've never been married, but the people I've known who've been married, it turns more into companionate and a partnership. You know, having to, centered around the kids, which is appropriate.
Yeah.
Which is entirely appropriate.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it's always going to be true that relationships have to change over time.
Yeah.
There's going to be some time at which your partner will no longer be able to have sex with you because they'll be dead. That's just, part of, like, you'll have to, like, figure out a way to move forward.
Right.
We
and everybody's body's going through changes too.
Oh, all the time.
Not just trans people.
And not just, it's just people all the time, heterosexual people all the time.
Yeah.
You will go through changes in your life that are uncomfortable and that will take away a lot of your personal ability to do intimate things.
Or whatever,
Or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, to go roller skating.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You'll always come to a point in your
No
life
more
where
Lindy Hop. You maybe do a waltz,
Life will always come to a point of disabling you.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. And whatever that means, like, I talk with her about, like, there's still people who have no ability to have sex, but they have a sexual relationship or things like that. But the state of mind is what
the younger kids have some new language around that. They say that they are more romantic, or they're aromantic, or they're sexual, or they're asexual. They're actually giving words to these things. Yeah.
And, like, those are, like, really interesting concepts that I feel like they're descriptive of, like, a headspace that's variable in everybody.
Yeah.
I think everybody's, like, I think the word is polymorphous perversity. Like, we all change our attractions and scales like that. And, like, so maybe day one I'm aromantic and day two I'm hyperromantic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
some people would describe that as more like in behavior. But some people actually have it as their identity as well.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, behavior and identity are always, like, complex things.
Yeah.
And we judge other people's identity by their behavior. We try and kind of gatekeep. Oh, are you trans enough? Are you
that's true.
are you aromantic
That's
enough?
true. And
you had a thought about candles, didn't you?
And they used to do that about queer people as well,
absolutely.
right? Are you gay enough? Or did you pass the test? Are you a
gold star?
Gold star lesbian or whatever? So,
right.
Yeah.
Oh, it's silly. Like, people are people.
Yeah.
Let humans be humans.
That's
Move on,
why I
make
love
decisions.
that there's like a lot of non-binary people that are kind of coming out and being part of the trans community, because they're just like, whatever.
It's like, okay.
I'm cool the way I am.
Yeah.
Revel in my glory.
Well, I mean, that's kind of the thing, is, like, when we look at gender and being beyond gender, we do kind of have to think of it, like, expanding beyond what male and female might be. About a decade ago, I picked up a book called Xenogenesis.
Oh yeah, right.
And it's got one of the first third gender representations.
Octavia Butler.
Yeah.
Yes.
And but the Uloi in that fascinated me.
Yes, me too.
They were like the connectors of people, and I thought, that's what I would be.
I thought it was always interesting how they sort of, consensually went in and joined with somebody, and then found the things that they could connect with, and also some of the things that were painful or what we might consider disease, but they kind of turned it around.
Right.
Yeah.
They found the advantages to cancer. Like,
Yes,
what is
exactly.
cancer? It's a way to try and heal of something.
That's right. Quickly.
Yeah.
I need to actually read those over again.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
They're so influential. It was like 77 that they came out, so it was like right at the same time as, like, Aliens were, like, those movies were starting.
Right.
And I feel like they're like a part of, like, really foundational science fiction for these days. And
I agree.
I didn't know a lot about Octavia Butler. I'm glad to see, like, more of her works are getting published and things
Yeah.
like that. But she's one of the authors that I'd say opened my mind up to the concept of empathy and radical empathy in
Yeah.
a lot of ways.
Yeah. And also the concept of slavery and non-consent in a lot of relationships as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was like one of the moments of like her world building being so incredibly intuitive. Like she talks about these creatures that they can't do any harm to each other without harming themselves. It's like built into it. So you would always feel the pain that you caused someone else.
Yeah. And she was really good at describing it too. Like whenever I would read her books, I would feel like what she was talking about. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's like, ooh. Anyway. So all you out there, read Octavia E. Butler.
Definitely.
And you will find other friends who will appreciate you.
It's revelatory.
Yes. Let's take a break for a second.
Okay. I need to get some water. Do you want some
fucking
water?
hot right now. I'm actually going to go out to my car. I think I left a soda.
There we go.
All right. Goodness gracious. Every part of me is sweating. It's so gross. Okay. Okay, so we decided to take a little break. And what were we going to talk about? I was thinking about since we're not exactly peers. I'm quite a bit older than you, but you're starting transition as a mature adult, and I was wondering kind of what that's like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I had a lot of different concerns kind of going into it about how much of like my day-to-day experience it would change.
Yeah.
And it is kind of one of those things that's like always there as a reminder in like social circumstances or things like that as
Sure.
you're traveling or moving about place to place. But I had a really affirming
Like going to the grocery
workplace.
store.
Yeah, going to the well, for the first time going to the grocery store in a dress or whatever. Anywhere you go, like first time or first time in a women's restroom in this circumstance or things like that. They're always a
what
little
was
bit,
that like? Especially now that so many places are considering banning that or whatever.
Yeah. Well, the first time that I did was at work because they have a policy. They've got it written down and codified that people can use the gender, the restrooms of the gender they prefer.
Great. It's interesting how corporations or workplaces are sometimes better than the state.
Yeah.
And it's so strange.
Well, it's a reason why you'll see a lot of transgender people going for national level retailers because they have to follow the national level rules for every state.
That's a good strategy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like, I work for a national cell phone company, and any of them will be just about the same because they have to serve all of the states, and they have to provide a standard of care for everyone that they can.
And insurance as well?
Insurance as well, covering that. So that was one of the reasons why whenever I signed for the job, I thought, I'm going to do this until I can do this,
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah.
It's like how some people go for certain jobs because they'll give them a pension. There's some trade-off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But for me, it was part of the package.
Yeah.
Is that I know that this will be an accepting workplace. I know it's going to be difficult for me everywhere else, possibly, but this is someplace that I know I can maintain my relationships.
Yeah.
And it really has been. All of my peers at work have been accepting and affirming. And it was really simple to run it by admin to change my name in the system. It happened like the same week that I requested
Just
it.
like, boom, okay, we changed it.
Boom, boom. Yeah, I mean, like all of the different little changes that have happened since then have taken months and months, but that one was just on the ball.
Like legal name change, like for, opening a bank account, like that kind of stuff. Yeah.
It takes weeks sometimes. I'm still getting credit cards, reassigned and things like that. The state itself took a little bit of time to change my name on the form. But before I had my name changed by the state, I had it changed by my job.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. Up in Alaska, it can things just move really slowly. We have terrible state governments. It can sometimes take years.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Things are a bit more connected here. So, but there's still like... I did it during a voting cycle, so they were dealing with all the election fallout stuff. So it took like a little bit of extra turnaround. Yeah, it's just being aware of that more than anything. Like, if you're kind of for the first time dealing with like government and state institutions, if you're worried about people discriminating against you, they're mostly just rubber stamp people. You know?
Yeah, they just want to get through their work and then go home.
Yeah, simple as possible.
Yeah.
And like DMV, I worried about that a lot because this is the first time I'm going to have this on like a legal document. And they were just like, do I change that here? Hold on, let me get somebody to help.
Yeah, you know,
okay, done.
I always wonder about that because that's generally what I think about like people who are working, because that's how I work too. You know, I just really want to get stuff done and go home. But then there's always these stories of like some pharmacist denying people medication or, you know, some clerk somewhere saying, no, you cannot change this. And it's so strange because it's like they're going way out of their way to cause problems for people. You know?
Those are the outliers from a lot of the national perspective, but those are a lot of what the rural experiences are, where there are towns that are run by a single church or a single mindset at the very least. And that can be really difficult to navigate through. And I went from a smaller town in Missouri to a bigger town in Missouri because I knew it would be more accepting as well.
Yeah, that's one of those trade-offs as well. Sometimes you do have to move to a place that is a little bit more accepting. And I know a lot of people are even considering that right now, moving state to state. Have you heard about anything like that? Because I know Missouri is having some problems.
Well, when the Attorney General Andrew Bailey put out an emergency act to ban...
Why emergency?
Yeah,
that's the question.
Because apparently there's a social contagion out there that's sweeping TikTok or whatever. The woke mind virus is taken on the
Besides
form.
the content, though, that of whatever bill, it seems like, or executive order, it seems like that's an abuse of power to say that something is an emergency.
Well, and they would have had to face that in court, but they've rescinded that act to avoid their litigation. But yeah, that would have been an embarrassing loss for Missouri because there would have been punitive damages. In this case, we have dropped it. There's still a pending bill, though, to ban just the affirming care for minors, people under 18, that will be taking effect on August 28th if it does pass the governor's desk.
And so has it passed your state Senate and House?
Senate and House, both. And that there's a bill for trans athletes, and then there's a bill for hormone and gender affirming care. They did put in some important provisions that are going to help it be a little bit more resilient in court. Like they say that you can have whatever First Amendment rights. So whatever you've got in that law, it can't say just calling your child by their preferred pronouns or their preferred name. That is allowed. That's acceptable. You aren't enforceable to do anything that is against your conscience.
That's interesting because in some places like Texas, for instance, you can't even do that.
So the state enforces the bigotry in some circumstances or tries to put in like the bathroom bill laws that are happening in Florida, or laws to try and ban people from specific jobs like teachers in Florida.
That reminds me of like the gay panic days, right?
Absolutely. They're all cut from the same cloth. It's one that starts back in World War II and before, and they'll always have the same playbook, generally speaking, to identify, isolate, and eventually eliminate.
It's interesting how this keeps cycling back, though. I mean, you'd think that we would learn that, you know, but I guess it doesn't. It's not about learning because it's really about just punishing people. It's about hurting people. It's about getting them to move from the state. I think, you know, there are people in places that I've interviewed, you know, and so far, like in Texas and in Oklahoma, and that are considering leaving, you know.
Absolutely. And that is part of the goal that they have, is to make it as uncomfortable for people who would have to identify as liberal as possible in order to, like, just take over these little rural areas, to, you know, make people congregate in a little bit different areas so that they can restrict the access to flyover states and things like that. There's a lot of different politics that push us this way and that, but I know that they can try and outlaw transgender people, but they can never really prevent people from being intersex, transgender, or gender non-conforming. That is impossible to do.
They can just make it as uncomfortable as possible, and not only just uncomfortable, but like
socially unacceptable is what they're trying to do.
And even criminalize people for various things. Like the thing about cross-dressing, drag, that's part of it as well.
It is.
Yeah.
But like the drag as a part of like public performance, like really should be pretty unquestionably a right of Americans.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's all part of rock forever.
Well, rock and roll,
music.
sure.
I mean,
Well, it's been part of World War II. It's like,
Sure.
why wouldn't you dress up like a girl if it would piss off the Nazis, right? Like,
well, yeah.
that Ronald
There
Reagan
were-
was in it.
there were some spies that also did that.
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
Right.
Well, J. Edgar Hoover, as much as you might
Sure.
detest him as an individual, but
Sure, he was a cross-dresser privately.
it does, yeah.
Yeah.
Like all of these people who have these heightened ideas of restriction, most likely do it out of a sense of forbidden arousal or attraction.
Yeah. Are we going to like go back to like women only wearing homemade dresses and made out of calico or something? I mean, is that the direction we're heading? And
Well, that would be
bonnets?
something they would really like because
Okay.
that means that the woman would be occupied by something
Sure.
that doesn't empower them.
Sure.
Yeah, we can
Barefoot-
go back to the idea of
barefoot
like,
and pregnant or whatever.
well, I mean, before we had the washing machine, women were bound and determined to
Sure.
have to wash clothes all the time. So,
bring out the washboards.
well, I mean, it was a rock on a river
Oh,
back in
okay.
the day, so
Right.
you'd have to make the whole
Paddle.
trip. Yeah.
A paddle, yeah, right.
But I mean, just like the way that we've divided labor a long time in society, like we've had women provide water, which is not it's
No.
not labor unintensive or whatever.
I
It's
used to
not
live
an
in
easy
Africa,
job.
in Zambia, and women would carry them on their heads.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, 50 pounds worth of water or something. I mean, wow. With
But-
a kid and with
Right.
like firewood.
Yeah, and you're watching everything and taking care of all of these
Yes.
things. And technology enables us to see how we divide gender roles a
Right.
lot better and gives us so much free time to explore gender roles and non-functional roles in society. Like not just in like the provider of the house, the person who brings back food from the fields or from the forests or whatever. Instead, it's this is a kind of person who plays video games or reads comic
Right,
books or
right.
goes dancing or
Sure.
It's like
So thinking about this, these state restrictions, which
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of like there seems to be a template that's going on.
Oh, yeah,
in
there
all
is.
the Republican-led
the Safe
states.
Acts.
Yeah,
And they're all from the Heritage Foundation
Is it
and DFL,
probably, and there's probably some
other intermediaries.
what is it? Focus on the family. Who knows? Who
Oh,
knows?
they're all intertwined.
They're all in there. They're all in there.
501c3s and
Yeah,
whatnot.
churches.
That are, churches are very much
Even though
providing
they
funds.
probably a lot of them got PPP loans as well.
This is true.
But anyway, so there's this state sort of oppression that's going on, and it's really blatant, and it's out there, and it's very active. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there's something like 500 bills right now.
465 was one count that
There
I
you
saw,
go.
but I mean,
There you go. So it's really getting up there, and there's all these resources being used for that. What's happening locally, to stem that, to push back on that?
locally,
Mm-hmm.
I'm in contact with a couple of different organizations from the state level, and there's a Missouri Railroad that we used on Discord to keep in contact about
Mm.
things, and also to make plans if we need to look at leaving the state or finding out
Okay.
about doing your own hormones or
Yeah.
getting sources for acquiring other resources, things like that.
People call that DIY.
DIY.
Do it
yeah.
yourself.
DIY, do
Yeah.
it yourself. But I've also got a local support group that's more of just like kind of a therapy and individual support group, which is Embrace. And we just focus on making sure that we've got a channel to chat with each other, talk with
Yes.
each other about these kinds of fears
Yeah.
and worries. And that's been
Right.
immensely helpful for a lot of people who've reached out and said, this is disrupting my life.
Well, that's great. So it's like some more like direct action, direct support kind of stuff, and then also social support.
Social support for communication and engineering. I like mutual aid, direct
Yeah,
action, so that's
right.
how I direct through my local support group. I recommend anyone who is trans needs to form, strong social bonds,
Yeah.
empathetic bonds with
Yeah.
people of their community.
Yeah.
And
ask for help if you need it.
Yeah.
A lot of people will not ask for help. And it's a value that we actually need to cultivate, because I don't know about you, but I want to help other people, but then I feel like I need to not ask for help.
Yeah.
Which that's a part of that value, is being able to ask for help as well. So
I mean, I feel like I'm fairly privileged to be where I'm at in life, and to be able to present and not have a lot of trouble from anyone in my life, generally speaking.
Well, that's great.
So I definitely want to be a resource to the people in my life.
Yeah.
And I have a platform through a podcast that I do to reach out between states here to...
Yeah, what's the name of that?
That's the Trans Narrative Podcast.
Okay.
And I'm a co-host of that. But we interview...
Is that on all the big platforms, Spotify?
Yeah, if you can
that?
stream it wherever, you can
Okay.
type in Trans Narrative Podcast, and
Okay.
it'll come up first in
Yeah.
Google or whatever.
I like it how they do that. Like like I'm on Anchor, so then Anchor
yeah.
just sends it out.
Same way.
I love that. I love that.
Anchor by Spotify.
That's right. That's right.
Go ahead and pitch your thing there. I'll sip on my water for a bit.
Okay. No, it's fine.
No.
Anyway, so it's great though if and you could do things like this too. You could have your own podcast talking about your own local issues.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, it's, when people are going through a genocide, they first have to try and find support through food and water and
The
shelter.
basics, yes.
And then they'll seek out printing presses
Yeah.
to let
right.
other people know.
Sure.
And after that, you support, you get arms to defend yourself.
Yeah. Right. I'm glad that you
This
said
is
that.
number two. This is number two. We're the propagandists of this movement to support our survival.
I'm glad you said that actually, because I just talked to somebody who's a cisgender straight male, white male, and he helps trans people and gender nonconforming and queer people become familiar with firearms and self-defense. So it's great. And I'm going to talk to somebody in Kansas City that's also interested in doing that. So, there's all kinds of different ways that you can help. You have skills. You can teach other people. That's a good thing.
Yeah. Every fighter has 10 backups, right?
That's right. That's right.
Somebody to provide food, somebody to provide shelter, somebody to provide, logistics, somebody to provide propaganda, somebody to
Legal aid.
legal aid, absolutely.
Yeah. Grandmas who can hold your hand.
That's it. Yeah, emotional support's a
That's right.
very valid resource as
That's
well.
right.
And just standing up and letting people know that you're an ally, wearing a pin or flying a flag for somebody.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Actually, I met two trans guys in this journey I've been taking, this road trip, who met each other at work in rural Kentucky because one of them had a little rainbow something. Oh. Yeah. And they were like, "Oh, I see you have a rainbow." That's right. So it can be useful in many ways. So what is happening, I guess, politically? So I was talking to some people in Oklahoma, and they're going to the state capitol. They're, protesting and that sort of thing. Is that sort of thing happening here in Missouri?
Yeah, we've sent up a couple of different groups several times up to Jefferson City to...
what area of the state is that, by the way?
So we're in Southwest Missouri here in Springfield.
Yeah.
So Central Missouri, there's almost nothing but the capital.
Okay.
So that's Jefferson
Do
City.
they have like a big university there or anything? Or just,
Nearby
just
is Rolla, which is a big engineering university, and there's Fort Leonard Wood, I believe, up in that general area. But there's a lot of different military and infrastructure, governmental things that are in between. But it's in between, kind of nestled between the bosoms of Missouri, which are St. Louis and Kansas City.
Right. I spent a lot of time as a kid in St. Louis. I've never spent time on this part of the state, though, so this is new to me.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Southwest Missouri's got an interesting history, and it's like a lot more of the South than Kansas City or St. Louis.
Yes.
There's a lot more of the South that hangs on because it was the battlefields of it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I bet there's still some lingering contention about that.
Contention would be one word to use.
Yes. Yeah. Do you ever see the flags flying?
I do.
And,
Yeah. So it's something that I've seen. I did a lot of rural routes around Joplin. It would just be like something, oh yeah, that trailer does have it. Always has.
Right.
They're not going to take it down no matter what we try and say to them. So
No.
best not to bring it up in polite conversation. I had a friend who was like a church leader. And I was at their birthday party, and they had a Confederate flag on their cookie cake that they'd put on. And I was like, they put that on from the mall? And he was like, yeah, why did you do that? That's my heritage. And I thought, I've got to look up to this person in some aspect of my life. So I'm just going to drop it.
So you're part of that
walk
church?
away.
Or...
No, I'm
Okay.
not a part of the church
Okay.
anymore.
I was
No,
like,
I've
okay.
walked away a long time
Okay.
ago from that. But like, no, back whenever I was young and naive, and I wouldn't have known what to say anyways, but there was a person in my church family, or whatever you want to call it, who was just saying, yeah, this is part of my heritage. And it was somebody who was like in like some sort of public servant role, and it was like talking about how to profile people. And it was like,
Goodness gracious.
I don't know how I managed to get through church with people just openly expressing their bigotry like that. It's like it was always
and that
difficult.
was during church?
Well, it was like in a separate, like, private service, like a private home-led services.
Okay.
Around here, that's a huge thing. You have
Okay.
the home services that you do on the Tuesdays or
Oh,
the
I don't
Thursdays.
know about that. Tell me about it.
No, I mean, it's like every day's got to have some church activity
Okay.
attached to
All
it.
right.
Whenever I was young, it was Sundays, you go mornings and evenings, and then the
Okay.
Wednesdays are for fellowship group. And if you want to get into, like, some youth activities, I think they had it on Thursday night, and then
Okay.
Bible drill was on Mondays. So I had
Okay.
the, Sunday, Monday, Wednesday,
Okay.
sometimes Thursday, sometimes Saturday experience for
Okay.
choir, choral, things like that. So there's
So
like,
it's fully involved.
it is a very much religious area. I went
Okay.
to Christian high school. Like,
Yeah.
So it was
Well, I've spent most of my time as an adult on the West Coast, and it's a little bit different.
a little.
It's church on Sunday and maybe Bible study on Wednesday. Maybe.
Yeah.
Mm.
I mean,
Much
there's
more secular.
different levels of it, but I don't know of like a single church that just does Sundays.
Yeah.
But I left that a while ago. It's
Not appealing.
well, it was almost part of like my realization that I was trans, and I thought, but a lot of what I'm thinking about and what I'm thinking about in religion, the verses that I think about, like when I think about transitioning medically, are attached in a way to Christianity that would make me uncomfortable. To have people think that I was representing Christianity in doing that, and I'm just frankly not comfortable with the word anymore. Even if I think that.
Well, it sounds like your church experience wasn't very good either. I mean, if it's so entwined with racism and the Confederacy, like feeling nostalgic about that, that's so strange. So
Well, that's not really what you talk about when you're in the church, though. You don't talk about the people you exclude. You talk about the glorious heaven that you'll all be in together, or whatever. But I don't know. I went through 4 years of high school, and I did a Bible class every year. I learned how to read in Greek, and just as I learned more about how to deconstruct the Bible and how to pull it apart and examine it critically, I just couldn't negotiate between what reality is and what the Bible says.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you take it very literally, and it's just not for you. Yeah. I mean,
Well, I was told to take everything literally in it. And now that I'm able to step back and view it more critically, I can think, somebody wrote this with a purpose.
Yes.
And somebody translated this with a purpose.
Yes.
Where I was taught, this is from God.
Right.
This is the truth. Plug it in your brain.
right.
Operate by this.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that definitely doesn't work for anybody. For some people, some people are able to navigate that and to be Christian or be queer and also trans at the same time. Some people come from a deconstructivist point of view, like you're talking about, and sometimes that's contentious among Christians as well. They don't want that.
That's very much the case.
Yeah,
around
they don't
here.
want to be critical.
They don't. They would not accept people in most churches around here who had a critical reception or a realistic interpretation of, or a scientific interpretation of reality.
Yeah.
It's incompatible
Which
with
is
their
what
worldview.
they often teach in, like I went to Harvard Divinity School. That's that's what they teach about the Bible. Is you have to know the deep history of it. You have to know the context. You have to know about who actually wrote it and the time and everything, to actually really understand the Bible and the beauty of it. You know.
Well, they tell you all of these things when you're in church, but then they tell you to appeal to your next authority. And so many of my friends who were in the same kind of Christian homeschooled or Christian school environment grew up to go on to those divinity classes, grew up to deconstruct their faith and have to walk away from it because they couldn't find a way to mesh it. And I know they still find parts of the Bible deeply affecting to them or deeply impacting them. I probably would have called myself a Christian up to last year if you'd really wanted to pin me down.
Okay.
I'm at least
Just more
culturally Christian.
Sure, or more passive.
Well, I mean, it's just when I think about some of the values that I hold in my mind, then they're probably going to have something that's in the Bible that's similar to them.
Sure.
Do unto others, and or don't do unto others, as they wouldn't have. You wouldn't.
There's
have
some fairly universal things.
Oh
in
yeah,
there,
but that's simple stuff.
Yeah.
So when I think about what does it mean to be a Christian? Well, does it mean that I hold in value in my mind for what Jesus said? Well, yeah, I do. Do I let them have power over my life? Kind of, yeah. I mean, I think about, the meek inheriting the earth, or blessed are the these or those and the others, and I think, okay, that'd be nice. That would be nice, but I don't believe in the afterlife. I don't believe in any kind of saving
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything but the matter in the universe that we've got.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for talking about that, because I can tell that it was something that you struggled a lot with. It seems like,
I dealt with a lot of dread of the concept of hell when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Up until I was about 25 or so, I wrestled with that concept.
Wow, that's well into your life.
It was part of my identity struggle, though, too, because I thought, I can't kick this. I can't get rid of this. And I know it says in the Bible that the effeminate do not inherit the kingdom of heaven. Now, it doesn't say which gender has to be effeminate.
Sure.
But no, I think of those things and I think, how could I cut it?
Is it because you're living in this place that is so dominated by that? Because I think of the West Coast, and, there's people who are very Christian, but it doesn't feel like you're kind of stuck in a cultural environment where you can't, explore something else. But maybe it feels that way here.
I was, but like the most exploration I could get was I can attend church A or church B for a while,
Okay, all right.
So I could go to my mom's church, and that's the Southern Baptist Church, and that's the problematic with race church, and then I could go to my evangelical dad's church, and that one has charismatic leaders and music that pumps you up and swells you up. And they tell you that the feelings that you feel during worship service, those ecstatic feelings, are God visiting you. And whenever you have those revelations or go through baptism or other things like that, they tell you that's God visiting you. Whenever you kiss your girlfriend for the first time and you feel those ecstatic feelings, they tell you that's God leading you to marry her. And I followed all of those intuitions. But I don't think that's God. That's just, that's human beings going through physical bodily changes. And if you seek that like addiction, it'll just lead you to get all the first kisses. Listen to all the loud music.
I've been to some of those services, and usually, and I talked to somebody about this who was more familiar with kind of like the rock and roll churches. The more rock bands that they have, the more conservative they are, because they really have to advertise their services to the young people because the young people do not want to go to those services.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, is that the music was a lot of the appeal to religion for me, because I grew up singing hymns from a church. I've got my wall of instruments over here.
I love to sing too. Oh, wow, yeah. I didn't even notice. See, we're in a garage, and I just kind of blank.
There's garage noise happening. There's bikes here. There's books there. There's laptops there.
I'm just let's get to the interview.
No, it's fine. Okay. But no, I mean, I went to college for music. Because it was,
really? Yeah. Okay, great.
But it was raised and kind of trained in classical music, and my parents always were like, okay, you got to watch the music that you input, so I only listened to Christian music until I was in college. So I went to college, and I started reading this book called The Lives of the Composers about some of the classical music I was allowed to listen to. And Mozart is such a pervert. I couldn't imagine telling my mom, okay, Tchaikovsky was gay, Mozart had so many affairs you can hardly keep count. Franz Liszt was an awful lecher. All of these lives of the composers that you told me were safe music are beyond the pale.
Right. They were the rock stars of their eras,
Absolutely
right?
They were. They were cutting edge. Mozart was the Skrillex of his day, or whatever. I don't know who's big these days.
I don't know either.
Lana Del Rey. No, I'm still probably 6 years behind, aren't I?
I am decades behind, so I don't know. So thinking about the state again, are there any particular groups that are kind of taking on these issues? Maybe advertise them a little bit.
The UCLA and what's the name of the group?
ACLU.
Lambda Legal. ACLU and Lambda Legal took on a case in order to
Those
fight.
are national.
Yeah, those are national, but they've got their local chapter in Missouri. But they took on a case in order to combat the Attorney General's case. But that obviously is dropped because they've dropped the emergency order. But they'll be, whenever there's time to try and impose that law, we'll be combating the other laws coming through for transgender sports. And hormone therapy or hormone.
Are these
blockers.
see, I don't know a lot about legal battles, but is it they're getting ahead of something being enforced, or is it after the fact, being sued for the impact of something?
Yeah, so it has to have demonstrable consequences
Okay.
in a legal field.
Okay.
And it was sufficient, the steps that they took, to prevent people from accessing care,
Yeah.
which means that was actionable. So
Yeah, will they also restrict that for cisgendered people who also get gender affirming care in various ways?
right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the answer is iffy on that. Like,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, right.
why would they block that? Why wouldn't they block that? They
Yeah.
don't think it's valid, you know, as medicine. Like,
Right, right.
They have really weird laws
There's
about how
lots
they
of
draw it.
issues around that.
There's tons of issues just
Yeah.
about who can access what. And
Because there might be like a more conservative streak that would say, no, we don't want anyone to get plastic surgery.
Condoms.
We don't want, or condoms or whatever.
we don't want anyone to dye their hair. We don't
Yeah.
want anyone to have
Right.
prosthesis for their eyes. We
Right.
don't want anyone to get
And that
dental
might be
care.
the next step. Who knows?
Well, the natural man is what we want. We only
right.
want the unvarnished human
The
being. No
scraggly,
clothes.
almost feral man. That's what we want.
I mean, it's hard to say. Like, modern technologies are so innovative and all-inclusive that where we draw the line for human beings and what is human and what we regard as a person has to be really kind of a cutting-edge part of our thought process. Like, when will
yes.
we treat an artificial intelligence with the respect we treat a person? Well, I mean, when will we at least treat them with respect we treat corporations, because we grant them legal personhood?
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
like all of those different arguments. And it does kind of come down to how expansive is your empathy, in my mind. Like, you know, how willing are you to let aside your assumptions of what you know of the world to approach reality from another perspective?
Well, that's that's way up here.
Sorry.
But
Bring it back
No,
then.
no, it's fine. It's fine. I just, I bring it down to, minding your own business.
Yeah.
I mean, speaking about God again, God gave us free will. He, God, he, whatever, gave us doctors who are very skilled, and obviously there's intersex and trans people, and we exist, so we're part of God as well. we're part of God's creation. Just to think about it along those kinds of terms, but there's a lot of different issues.
There are.
How conservative are we gonna get? Are cisgendered people? I guess they're not worried about that, but it could also affect them as well.
I don't feel like on a national level, on a large scale level, we can keep people ignorant enough and
Especially with the internet.
keep them hateful enough at each other. But that's the big scale issues. What I feel will happen is we'll have these pockets of dying conservatism become increasingly radicalized and increasingly armed, possibly.
Yeah.
That's really what it kind of looks like to me, is that church groups become militia groups when they feel like they're being excluded from the national conversation. And then we get Westboro Baptist and other groups like that who just try and target. Now, they're a cleverly, legally, only words organization that Westboro Baptist just does it for the money, really, in the background.
It seems like with what's going on right now, though, those pockets are really expanding. So,
well, I mean, they find footholds, and it's not really in the small towns that you see necessarily some of the bigger names like Greg Locke in Nashville.
Okay.
And like, he puts out hateful content, and there are explicit things like death threats and things like that you can find just by searching through his material. And he makes no bones about being a Christian nationalist. And that's probably the biggest platformed Christo-fascist that I know of. But
it's interesting, though,
that's just
because
mirrored.
Nashville is not really all that conservative for Tennessee.
No, but that's just the most conservative church there.
Yeah, okay.
But no, that sentiment is mirrored in small towns, lots of places.
Okay.
Because that's just the one mega church that happens to be Christian and fascist that I can really point at consistently and say, wow, there.
Yeah.
Although there's James River, which is here in town, and that's a mega church that they recently had a manhood presentation of some kind with a tank on stage and a guy with a M16.
That sounds like gender affirming something.
It seems to be gender making up for something.
Something like that.
But I mean, just like very like nationalism, patriotism has been a part of this neck of the woods for as long as we've been around. I mean, Spirit of 76 things have been things that I was raised with blankets and embroideries and things like that. And And then after 9/11, that got another
Right.
kick in the pants. Well, I mean, I remember
Everybody
singing
was flying
patriotic
the flag.
songs. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
In church in like 92 Gulf War, where
Yeah.
you talked about like praise God and pass the ammunition kind of stuff.
You know, where I was living at the time, actually, the first people who put up flags were recent immigrants who had restaurants.
Yeah.
They were like, put the flag everywhere because they were so worried.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine that. I always had like a lot of empathy for that. Like I went to like secular school, I went to public school growing up, and I had friends who were, you know, black and brown, and that was never a problem. I didn't really notice that much of a lack of black and brown people, but the people who were there were mostly people who were adopted. They were people not there really necessarily by their own volition, or that they were put into the school system to sort of Christianify them, or, you know, Christianize them, I guess. But yeah, there's a lot of...
Wow. I've never heard of that. I mean, I've heard of it for Alaska Native as well as Native American people, but not for black communities.
But it's you know, it's more complicated, I'm sure, than I'm making it, but it definitely seems like there were no people of color in whole families.
I see. Okay.
In the parts of Christianity that I attended, there weren't really any mixed race couples.
Right.
Even though, like, you know, we were like, well, we'd be really accepting of it. They just wouldn't be comfortable. There's part of the history of the areas involved with it.
Well, you know, I used to work for a church, actually, when there was one of those absolutely horrific shootings within a church a few years ago. I'm not going to name the person, but it was a white shooter, and it was in a black church. And at the time, I said to the pastors that I worked for, why don't, you know, I mean, I was just an assistant, so it was kind of a risk for me to say this because, you know, I could probably lose my job if I piss them off. But I was like, you know, why doesn't this church go to another church or make a bridge here, you know, because I think that black churches are probably feeling unsafe right now. You know, let's invite them to our church. Let's go to their church, worship together, and, you know, talk about this because it's painful. And they said no, that their parishioners would not be ready for that. You know, and what kind of pastor, what kind of shepherd is that? You know, I was really disappointed, I got to say. Well, and that was a liberal church. That was a high liberal church.
Yeah, and if you think about, though, like what runs the churches, there's a lot of financial interest. And having to keep those parishioners happy who have more conservative beliefs and deeper pockets.
That's true.
It's a huge part of the equation. It's why it's like a conservative force in...
Even people who call themselves liberal, which is a very contentious term, like who knows what that means now.
It's supposed to mean
individual
liberty.
Individual liberty. They still want to hold on to all their money. They don't want to share it.
Yeah. Well, that's like liberalism and then crouching into libertarianism a little bit. There's a pretty big idea around here, too, is the government shouldn't be in anything at all. We should just be able to do whatever we want by ourselves.
But they will give money in small packages to charities.
Right. Well, they think that the role of the church is just to take the places of all the charities that you might see.
Right.
Or,
But then they won't make fellowship with their neighbors in the same city.
No. Well, like Mike Watt has been thinking about purchasing a church to convert to a family house. And then if we can use it to help provide shelter for people who are in need.
Do it.
Do the job of the church that we were raised to do. To provide shelter,
reclaim
clothing,
that
food.
Space.
Right. Well, that's what's holy to me, really, is helping other people out. The work, you know, that Jesus wanted to do, I feel, is like just to help people. You know, nothing special about that necessarily, but it's something good to look for. Yeah,
it's interesting. A lot of the trans people that I've talked to in this project who, you know, kind of outwardly you would say maybe they were Christian, actually don't identify that way. They say that they are followers of Christ.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Right.
Something that distances themselves from the actual church, like the harm that the church is doing.
Right.
As organizations.
And I feel like that's like the Christian's job these days is to detoxify the harm that churches have done to whatever you want to think about it.
I was just hanging out with a couple of people. One's a pastor, one's a lay pastor, and the other one they've been defrocked by a church, and they might have a position in another church, though. And the other one works as a chaplain. They're both very good. They're both queer. One's trans. Anyway, they were saying that... what were we just talking about? Sorry. I'm losing it. I'm like so hot right now.
No worries. Well, faith and...
Oh, yeah. They have to always... the chaplain was saying that she often has to have conversations where she's kind of almost apologizing or explaining why she's Christian, because people don't understand it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think of that a lot. Like, whenever I tried to tell my kids, hey, you really can be whatever you want to be.
Yeah.
You can be a Christian if you want to be. And I said, you can try and believe that. And I thought of all the things that stacked on top of each other that are involved. And I'm like, where would I even start telling this story to my kids these days? Like, they've heard about, a lot of the pieces. And I'm sure that they've had a chance to kind of piece them together, but I don't think I can ever make it make any more sense than it ever
That's
did to
why
me.
I like what UU does. Unitarians,
it's like explore whatever spiritual truths you can.
Explore it all, and then, make some decisions down the line or just keep trying.
Just hang there.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Whatever.
It's all good. It's part of the human experience.
Yeah.
In the end.
Yeah, I love it that they open up to other faiths too. Like, often Muslims here in America don't have a place to go, so they will go to spaces that UU churches open up for them, which is beautiful, absolutely beautiful that they do that. Anyway, how should we end this? What do you think? What else would you like to talk about? I don't think I've given a high five since the 80s. I don't actually. It's like a cringy thing.
Well, you got to lean into your cringe.
Okay.
Own the cringe. That's the trick to it.
I'm too sensitive, though. Even with all my testosterone, I'm still too sensitive.
Whoa, that was a strong hype. Ow, God. Oh, wow.
Yeah, right.
You gotta watch
These
it.
tiny baby hands, I don't think so. Anyway, yeah, this was fun. You're a very complex person. I'm so glad to hear about your quad relationship. That hasn't been brought up here, and I think it's great.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of things that we have to re-examine.
I feel like if we'll learn anything as a society from this year to the next, we'll be a lot more accepting of polyamorous relationships, even if a lot of more people aren't accepting of transgender people.
Yeah.
Because, I don't know, I grew up with divorced parents.
Yes.
So it was like,
Right.
Why do you want to divorce my mom? Don't you love her? Yes. Okay, well, why don't you stay? Okay, well, now we can just say, we can love multiple people at the same time.
In some ways, cisgender straight people have been already doing that for a long time.
Yeah.
They just call it something else.
Exactly,
You
yeah.
know?
Divorce, remarry, have an
right.
affair, whatever. No, I want to
Stepdads,
have long-term
stepmoms.
relationships with people that mean a lot to me.
Yeah.
And not say goodbye and not have to say,
Yes.
I don't love you anymore.
Right.
Or not have to say, I don't want to spend the rest of my life with you.
That's right.
I can have multiple loves at the same time, and they can have multiple
And,
loves.
like we were saying, roles and what you're actually doing and your love can change. And what a great thing. I mean, I look forward to that at some point. I'm single, by the way. So there's a
Ladies,
bit of,
boys.
There's a little bit of envy here.
Whatever your preference is.
No, actually, it's
PC
not.
stays.
It's not a new thing either. I mean, I was just talking about like cisgender people having that sort of model as well, like stepmoms and stepdads and that sort of thing. Blended families, they call
Blended
it now.
families,
But also, this is not a new thing. I mean, I've known older gay and lesbian couples who are basically in quads before. So to hide or to be less public about being queer and having children or cohabitating, they would...
It's an au pair.
Yes, so there would be two heterosexually looking couples, but it was actually two homosexual couples. Yeah.
Lavender marriages.
Exactly, yeah, the beard thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, so thank you so much. I have quite a schedule coming. In the next 2 weeks, I basically have 2 interviews every day.
Awesome.
Yeah, here. This is my only one here in Springfield, but I'm going up to Kansas City, Des Moines, Iowa, and then I'm turning west and then north again. So eventually I will be home in Alaska.
It's a lot of like red state territory. I really think you're doing important work.
Well, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm not the important work part, but trying to hit the harder places that it's harder to be queer and trans, and talking to people who are rural or religious, or you're very interesting. I had no idea what you were about, and that's usually how I'm coming in. I have no idea who I'm talking to, and I find it's always interesting.
Yeah, it's a fresh perspective.
Yeah,
and I think one of the best things to do in a time like this, if you're in media, is just to have average conversations with average people.
Yeah. Which is funny though. I'm not in media. I'm just I'm
just saying, like, anyone
running
who's
around
in media, like if you just have average conversations with average people, you'll find that the sentiment is really pretty tepid at the very least. Even in spots that we might think are hot towards transgender people, you can live and thrive and survive, and you won't get cast out necessarily unless you're in a difficult home situation or things like that.
Yeah.
I think a lot about the people who aren't, privileged like I am to be, like I'm white, I've got some passing privilege.
Yeah.
I've got a job and things like that won't exclude
and
me.
activists are really stepping up too. There's allies, and there's also people within the trans and queer communities who are stepping up, who are making I keep talking to people who are creating LGBT youth shelters, for instance. Which is so necessary, because oftentimes people, kids are cast out, minors are cast out by their families. And other sorts of solutions like that, like you were talking about, being able to travel to a different state, mutual aid, financial aid, whatever it is. There's things that people can do. If you think that you can't do something, just think a little harder.
Mutual aid, direct action. Just listen to the people that you know. And if you don't know anybody who needs something, they probably know somebody who does.
Yeah, basically, if you see that there's a problem, complain about it a little bit. But then once you complained a little bit about it, do something. Yeah, do something. That's what activism is. Activism is action. It's not just complaining. So, all right. I think that's a good place to end. And somebody's coming here in the garage. All right. Thank you so much. No, it's fine. We're ending right now.
Yeah, we're good.
All right. Thank you so much for talking to me. Yes. Even though it was a little bit difficult, the scheduling is always difficult.
I hear you.
Yeah, especially since I have a dog. Yeah. But he's my companion, so.
Well, we make time where we can. We do what we can when we can.
That's right. All right.
Well, thanks a bunch for having me.
Yes, thank you. All right. See y'all later.